The fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas continued to hold today. We've got experts standing by to speak about the political fallout across the region. But let's get the latest now from the CBC's Sasha Petrusik. He's in Gaza with what's happening right now.
For the first time in more than a week, they're heading to sea instead of running for cover. Gaza's fishermen, not just savoring the ceasefire, but claiming victory. Never mind their planes and tanks, he says, we beat them with simple rockets. Now they're looking forward to the end of Israel's blockade of Gaza, something the ceasefire agreement seems to promise. If they don't deliver, he says, we'll hit them even harder. At the hospital today, the wounded were recovering. 15-year-old Abdel Rahmad nursing a knee pierced by shrapnel, and memories of his little brother, killed by the same missile. All I think of is his bloody body, lying there. Gaza is recovering and rebuilding. 8 days of this destroyed buildings and ruined some neighborhoods, but it may also have changed the way Palestinians here see themselves and their struggle with Israel.
The only way to confront Israel, the only way to deter Israel is through fire and through the use of long-range missiles, as we have seen during this war.
Through force?
Yes.
As life returns to normal here, many are thinking that the normal has changed. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Gaza.
So is that the lesson of this? Violence will beget more violence. Now, Egypt played a very critical role leading to this peace deal. They brokered it. But today, a top cleric of Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood denounced the developments and also called for a holy war to free Palestinian territories. All this raising the question, is this a temporary truce? Can it hold? The political fallout for the entire region, including big influential countries like Turkey on the line here. Still the situation with Iran and Syria. So there's lots of pieces on the chessboard. In Toronto, Jonathan Kay is the editor of the National Post newspaper. He joins me. And in Winnipeg, Mohamed El Rashidy is the Canadian with the Canadian Arab Federation. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. Mohamed El Rashidy, let me get your reaction to that. What's the lesson being drawn in Gaza from this? Was this will Hamas? I mean, every side will declare victory, but is the lesson more violence and long-range missiles, as we just heard from Sasha Petrusyk's piece?
Yeah, but obviously there are a lot of groups in Gaza. They're going to draw different conclusions from it. Overall, people do feel some achievement. You got to remember, when we go back to the 2008 invasion, it was a completely different story. So this is a better ending insofar as the Gazans are concerned. So there's definitely a positive feeling in relation to that. But I think at the end of the day, as time passes, we will realize that the situation of Gazans has not changed in the sense that they're still under blockade from Israel, essentially living under siege. So nothing can access them by air. Israel has destroyed the airports. Nothing can come in through that. Nothing comes in through the water. You showed the fishermen fishing there. They can only fish right by the shore. They can't go for real fish. Where
just to be fair, there are humanitarian aid, and there are all the border crossings are now open, right? The Rafah crossing from Gaza into Egypt, and other crossings are open, to be fair.
Of course, but Evan, it's not a way to live on aid. You can't thrive on aid. Building material is not coming in, and we're talking about something that just happened yesterday of opening the crossings. Well, it hasn't been opened in a really long time. And even when it is open, what are you allowing trade? You're not allowing trade. So Gaza's not going to be able to rebuild, and they're going to stay in this environment, which definitely is going to breed more violence.
I guess let me get Jonathan Kay in here, Mohamed El Rashidy. Jonathan Kay, so what's the lesson? I mean, if this does continue the situation, is the lesson more hardline politics from Hamas, or is it broker some kind of deal with Fatah, get rid of parts of the Hamas charter and start working with Israel on a different level? What do you think the fallout will be?
Well, look, Hamas has complete control of the Gaza Strip, and so long as Hamas is single-mindedly devoted to the destruction of the Jewish state, nothing's going to change. I agree that this war probably won't change that much. It destroyed a lot of Hamas's missile stock, which is a good thing. It maybe set Hamas back a couple of years in that regard, but there'll probably be another confrontation like this in a couple of years. Until Hamas decides that building a society in Gaza is more important than trying to kill Jews, you're probably going to see not much change.
What about Israel? I mean, does this embolden a hardline approach from Netanyahu vis-a-vis Palestinian issue in the West Bank and in Gaza? Or does this say, look, there's an endless cycle of violence. It's time to change some of the broader policy issues for Israel in order to start ending the violence on their side.
I think if Netanyahu was smart, he'd take some steps to empower Mahmoud Abbas in the West Bank. Unfortunately, Netanyahu is much better at confronting folks like Hamas than he is at dealing with more moderate factions such as you have in the West Bank. I think Netanyahu has missed an opportunity in the last year or two with Fatah in the West Bank, and maybe this will make him reconsider because he can't play hardball with both factions. He has to offer some avenue of progress to moderate Palestinians.
Evan, I want to build on that because that's a very good point that Jonathan makes. Israel has an impeccable record of producing brilliant people. Unfortunately, we don't see any of them in government today. But what they have done is build a civil society that has taken great steps, for example, brokering the ceasefire. And as Jonathan said, Netanyahu's not good at playing with moderates. He shattered that ceasefire that was created by some of these Israelis who work behind the scenes with Egypt. And that's really the problem that we're going to run into now. Hamas has its own internal problems, but Netanyahu does not have a government that can lead this situation into a peaceful transition. He cannot have peace negotiations with the government, with Lieberman and others. He can only continue to thrive on these kinds of conflicts, whether it be with Iran or Hezbollah or Hamas. So he's really not capable.
But before you say that, I think you're making a really critical point, Mohamed El Rashidy. But I want you to have to parse it. Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran are difficult for Israel to deal with. As you know, two of those they call terrorist groups. Different, though, with Fatah. And by the way, we should point out that Fatah is going to go to the United Nations and ask for a recognition of the Palestinian state in the UN next week. So there's some issue. What does Abbas and Netanyahu have to do now?
Well, Evan, you got to think big, okay? Let's think big here. Let's not get sucked into the moment. You have to look at the big picture. Hamas didn't exist before 1990, certainly insofar as an attacking force. Hezbollah, also a new player on the scene. The idea that the Palestinians have gone from throwing rocks to rockets really should raise some alarms. You need to focus on the state players, not the non-state actors. All the Arab states, and Jonathan knows this, in 2002 have put forward a peace agreement that everybody really agrees as the premise of going forward. UN resolutions, going back to the 67 lines. Even Khalid Mishal, the head of Hamas, agreed. I heard him on CNN with Christiane Amanpour saying they'll go back to the 67 borders. They don't have to agree to all the details now, but the point is the framework is there. And if you work with the moderates, you work with all the Arab states, even Egypt, which now has a conservative brotherhood president. Everybody was talking about how afraid they are of that. Well, look, even the most conservative religious side coming out of the Arab world is working towards peace day and night and succeeding at bringing about a ceasefire. You got to do the same thing on the Israeli side. But Netanyahu's not the man for it because he will never be able to confront the settlers and the religious parties there. This is, I think, where the next problem is.
Jonathan Kay, there's another. The regional play is interesting. I want to talk about Iran, but as Egypt emerges as a broker for peace here, and they're going to be very influential vis-a-vis Hamas, the Prime Minister of Turkey, Erdogan, calls Israel I'm just making sure I got this right, a terrorist state. All right, that's significant. By the way, Turkey and Israeli relations over the last number of years have deteriorated, but it's classically been a very strong and important relationship. What do you make of that step?
Well, I think it's a brilliant masterstroke for Morsi. He looks like the master statesman in the area. And it's especially significant given that a lot of Westerners, especially hawks, thought that this guy would be a destabilizing force. He might in the long term be a destabilizing force, but for now he actually looks like he's picked up the mantle of Mubarak in the sense that he's become a stabilizing player. So I think he comes out of this well. In terms of Turkey, the last couple of years they've taken an anti-Israel stance. But in the last few days, you're hearing commentary out of Turkey where they think it was a mistake to alienate Israel so much because now they have no influence in the region. When Hamas and Israel come to blows, they have no influence with Israel because they've already gone on record as calling Israel a terrorist state. So Egypt then becomes the main player. So in terms of the rivalry between Ankara and Cairo, it swings in favor of Egypt. From the Israeli perspective, I'm not sure it makes much difference, but it is a rivalry for power within the Muslim world in the Mediterranean region.
What's your take on that, Mohamed El Rashidy? Because there's lots of relationships going on here between Egypt, Turkey, and of course Iran's
absolutely,
influence.
Really good point. The Turkey relationship, you have to remember where it was completely severed, right? This takes us back to the last attack on Gaza, major one, 2008, Operation Cast Lead. Once again, the new president in the U.S. takes over, and what do you know? Israel attacks and goes in. And when Turkey sends in that flotilla flotilla with people on there with aid and so on. A lot of them were Turks, and they were killed. And that's when Turkey severed relations. You have to look back and say, well, why did that happen? It's not like Turkey all of a sudden switched their point of view about the situation. No, they had a serious situation. Israel wouldn't even apologize for killing these guys. And that's where the problem is. It's the Lieberman type of individuals in an Israeli government are where the source of the problem is. But we have to distinguish the rhetoric from the actions. Okay, when you're talking about a cleric out of Egypt saying whatever he's saying, look, now as the country opens up, you're going to get a lot of these crazy statements being made out in the open. That's where we want them to be, right? We want them out in the open instead of out of caves, planning attacks. So that's a good sign in my view. But you have to look at the actions. A country like Egypt, right?
I got 10, 20 seconds here.
I'll be very quick. Look at the cities next to Israel. They have more Sharm el-Sheikh in the Sinai, more hotel rooms than Toronto. That's the direction these people want to go. They want to build their economy. They want to have tourism. It's not about war, and we hope that Israel can also take that step, and that'll have to be without Netanyahu in the January election.
All right, Jonathan Kay, 10 seconds. Is Netanyahu emboldened by this ceasefire or weakened?
I think Netanyahu has been a great guy defending Israel in wartime, but I think he has to stand back and say, what's my long-term plan here? We can't impose a blockade on Gaza forever. That's not the long-term solution. Maybe from a position of relative strength now, he can find a more long-term solution to the issue.
All right, the follow to this continues, and this is very complicated, but very interesting as we watch it. Jonathan Kay, Mohamed El Rashidy, really interesting debate tonight. Thanks so much to both of you.
Thank you.